Welcome to the second day at Civil War at the Heritage Village in Miamisburg, Ohio. Let's go see what we can find today. Today we're going to listen to Dana Gagnon give us some informative talks about authentic clothing of the 1860s. She's a reenactor, and she will also teach us about the parts that make up the historically accurate clothing and how you can create or assemble the pieces for your own attire. Maybe become a reenactor as well. Let's check it out. Okay, can you tell me your name and what you're going to show for us today?
Hi, I'm Dana, and today I am here talking about the layers of what an 1860s lady wears, exactly the layers I'm wearing under this dress, and the kind of layers that would be worn under this dress, which is actually a dress from the collection of the Miamisburg Historical Society. And you can see it's a very similar cut to what I'm wearing. There are a couple key differences that give me clues that this dress is probably 1870s and mine is 1860s, but essentially the same idea. And let's start at the beginning and work our way out. Miss Mary Mannequin here under her dress should be wearing drawers. You don't call them bloomers, that means something else in the 1860s. It's another kind of outfit. They're drawers. And they are not sewn in the middle, and that's on purpose, and I'll let you figure that out. But it's the answer to the question, how do you go to the bathroom in all that clothing? And that's the answer. She's also wearing a chemise. They used to call them shifts, but in the 1860s, we like French words. It makes things sound fancy. So a chemise doesn't have to be fancy with the ribbon, but this is the thing against her skin. She will have a whole closet full of these. These are, you can bleach these and wash these. You're not going to wash your dress all the time. You're not going to wash your corset all the time. You're going to wash your chemise all the time. So that's the next thing that she's wearing. The next thing after that is the corset. And I can talk a lot about what movies say about corsets that are completely not true. First of all, you can move around in a corset and it doesn't make you not breathe. And you look at this small one that someone has outgrown here, and it's bendable. Even though it has boning in it, it's a flexible steel boning that goes in there. You have a busk in the middle. That one has hooks, but there should be a busk in the middle. It's going to give you a little support. It's going to give you the shape, but there's also an engineering reason to wear this. It's going to distribute the weight of the fabric of the skirts you're wearing on top. If you're missing this, you're going to realize at the end of the day that your back is a little bit sore. So this is not a bad thing to be wearing. Ladies aren't unhappy about wearing this. You're not going to lace this so you can't breathe. That would somehow indicate you forgot how to put on your underwear. I don't know why you would do that. Now that you have this on, you can start thinking about your skirt support. What's going to put your skirt out? If you're not wearing it, you're going to trip over your skirt. Your skirt was made the length for the things that it's over. And you could use one of two things. You could use a hoop, because it's the 1860s. I'm wearing a cage hoop. It literally looks like a cage. You can kind of guess where the name comes from. Cage hoops are very affordable. They are not for rich people. They can be bigger and fancier if you want to wear it over a ball gown or under a ball gown. But I'm wearing a 90-inch everyday hoop. You can work in it. There are photographs of ladies who are maids wearing them. This is a very industrial era, and factories are turning these things out very cheaply. You can buy a hoop. It makes your life so much better, because otherwise, without the hoop, to get the right amount of poof, you have to layer starch petticoats, and that's what they were doing. So what if you, to get the right amount of poof, had to have 5 starch petticoats? What if it was 8 starch petticoats? That's ironing, that's washing, that's laundry, that's so much work.
That's hot.
It's hot, and it's the weight of the fabric, which fortunately is being supported by your corset, but why, right? Because modern technology of the 1860s, the hoop means now I have 2 petticoats on, 3 would be nice, 2 or 3 starch petticoats, that's all I need, because it'll smooth out the rungs, I won't have bumps, and I will have the shape with so much less laundry, so much less weight. So ladies don't see hoops as something, hoops are an engineering marvel for the fashion of the 1860s. Very happy about it. Now this is when I talk about changes. Her dress is a little shorter in the front than the sides and the back if you look at it closely. That gives me a clue that this is 1870s and not 1860s. Because what happens to this hoop shape when you get a little further on is instead of the 1860s circle, it starts becoming an oval. And you start getting a little bit more to the sides and the back. which explains the hemline of her skirt. So that's how you can start getting clues. One way you can some clues about that garment. So we've got my skirt support. Now what if I didn't want to wear a hoop and I needed a little bit of poof to keep my dress from tangling? I could wear a corded petticoat. This would need to be starched because all these layers of cording need to absorb the starch and give it some stiffness. Put a couple petticoats over that and I will have a little bit of poof. It'll stay away from my legs. So that's an option. It's a little bit old-fashioned for the 1860s, but it's available. And then you have your dress. That's it. You have your petticoats and then you have your dress. You've got a dress that goes off the shoulders a little bit because you want it to be rounded. It's such a style to be rounded, which I'm a fan of. This also shows you why you don't need to cinch in your waist so you can't breathe, because the style has enough rounding and poofing that it makes my waist look smaller, which I'm a fan of because it's not actually a very small waist. And then you have some choices for shoes. There's a low shoe, like an Oxford for a walking shoe. This is a very common, they're very flat shoes. These are reproductions of 1860 shoes that I'm not wearing because it's raining. And you can see they did have elastic. This has an elastic insert so you can put them in and not have to actually do all those buttons, which is fantastic. They had elastic in the 1860s. They didn't put it in the same places we put elastic. And then of course there's another reproduction, the good, sturdy, soft work boot that you can wear everywhere all the time and it's comfortable. It's still got a very low heel. You see this nice little square toe. They really love a square shape in a toe. And you're pretty ready to go. Her dress is missing a collar because that's a detachable thing. Back in the day we used to worry about ring around the collar. Somehow we stopped worrying about that. But this is something that you have a whole drawer, just like your chemise where you have a bunch of them and those are washable. You have a whole drawer of collars that you can just whip on and off and you can scrub these. And I can have a fresh collar tomorrow if my dress is all icky and ready to go. So her dress is missing the collar, but that's because she wouldn't have put it away with the collar. The collar was in the drawer with the collars. She doesn't need it with that. And that is a speed run through the very basics of ladies' clothing.
Nice. Well, thank you. So now, with ladies' dresses, they only had like 2 or 3, didn't they?
So
in general, the regular people?
Regular people generally. Okay, so this is actually very interesting. By the 1860s, you had more. You still had your nicer dresses and your wash dresses. Wash dresses doesn't mean you're doing the wash with it. It means you can wash it. So this is a cotton dress. I can wash this. I don't have to wash it every time I wear it. That seems excessive because I have all those other layers. You can have more dresses in the 1860s because fabric is cheap now. The fabric is getting churned out since the 1840s. The United States has had cotton mills in Lowell, Massachusetts. Not here, and so you can go to your general store and buy printed woven fabric. It's not all hand woven on a loom anymore. They have these great big looms, and the Merrimack River is churning the power for those looms. And the mill girls are going there and getting an education and also doing dangerous jobs working the mills. But it means that fabric is now, cotton fabric is now accessible, which is different from the end of the 1800s, where cotton fabric is actually the nice stuff that's probably coming from India, and it might be block printed or it might be carefully printed in England because we didn't have our own industry yet. And cotton was an expensive thing, and you wouldn't have as many of them. But
so I was thinking earlier time period when I thought that, not 1860s. They were zooming along.
What's really nice about this weekend is that normally we talk about this tavern in 1811 because that's when this tavern was built. But of course it was still here in 1860. So this weekend we get to talk about what's happening, who lived in this later. What were they wearing in this tavern later? They were wearing things like this. And
okay, so I'm thinking when the beginning of the tavern that they only had a couple dresses, maybe 3. Gotcha.
There are inventories, there are death inventories from the 1700s and the 1800s where when someone passed away, they wrote down every ever-loving thing that they owned, and that's how we actually do have ways to find out how many dresses someone had. So it's more than we think. Not as many as we have now where we buy and we stick it in the closet forever, but a few. They can have a few dresses, and depending on their station. Also, in the 1860s, we tend to reenact with one dress we wear all year because we don't do this every day. But they had different dresses and different fabrics and styles for different weather. So sometimes we look at someone in that same dress all times of the year and we go, well, that must have been freezing or that must have been hot. But if it were 90 degrees out, I wouldn't wear this weight cotton. I would wear a nice cotton sheer, maybe even a wool sheer, because wool doesn't absorb water, and a nice sheer, we don't even see these fabrics anymore. We see wool as like a blanket or a uniform. They had dress weight wool and sheer wools and things like that.
Wow.
Silks were not the China silk that we use that's all like flimsy kind of feeling. It's a taffeta silk that they might have not just a ball gown, but a nice day dress out of, to go visiting, to invite people over, to go to Sunday church. They might have a silk gown. There's materials that they had that we don't necessarily find as easily anymore.
Okay.
Did the women all make their own clothes, their own dresses?
Oh, great question. They did not have to. They did a lot more of the sewing, though, and actually I can give you a very specific example from the 1850s. Harry Beecher Stowe, who lived in Cincinnati for almost 20 years and then moved up to Maine in 1850, Harry Beecher Stowe wrote about every season, she had lots of children, right? So every season you need a whole new set of clothes for everybody in your household, and that's a whole lot of sewing. And there was someone in Maine, so she wasn't rich enough. Her husband was a college professor. They did not have a lot of money. They got money after she wrote the book, right? But before that, when she first moved to Maine, the kids were still young. They couldn't really help her as much with the sewing as she might have needed. So there was a woman in their town in Maine who would go from house to house and stay at someone's house for like 2 weeks and help them measure, draft, cut out all the pieces, and then move to the next house. Mm-hmm. So Harriet Beecher Stowe is still an active part of creating the clothing. She's not one of the fancy people who is commissioned them, because that's an option if you have the money. She's not one of those people. And there are people who, if you're an upper class person and you want to find dress for the next event, you would call the mantua maker, and the mantua maker is a dressmaker. Mary Todd Lincoln had an African American dressmaker who did all the finest dresses that were in Washington, D.C. at that time. Used to do it for everybody, North and South, until Mary Todd Lincoln basically monopolized her and said, nope, you're my dressmaker now. Her name is Elizabeth Keckley, and you can look up really interesting. She's a very interesting person. So she was a mantua maker. She made fine dresses. Everyday people made their own things, but you might hire someone to help. It might be a partner, kind of half and half situation.
So maybe she would have this lady helping her, and she would do some of the sewing herself as well. Okay.
Harriet Beecher
Just to get it
Stowe
done faster.
did a lot of the sewing herself.
Mm-hmm.
But part of the thing is, every time you sew something, it's the sizing, fitting, garment cutting, all of those pieces are the thing that, like, if someone would do that for you, it would be magic. So to have someone come for that phase and then say, okay, now I have to do the rest of the assembly.
The thing that's ready to just make.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
Okay.
This is important to know that the 1860s also had sewing machines. Now, they didn't use it in every place we would. They're hand sewing. Some pieces of the styles actually just go to better with hand sewing. The way the skirt is attached has to be done by hand. If it's cotton and not silk or wool, it's most commonly attached, and so is this one, with cartridge pleats. Oh, these teeny tiny little, they look like cartridge pleats. But they're not squished together and pushed through on a machine to sew them. You whip stitch the top of each bump onto the waistband. And what that allows you to do is squish a ton of bulk of fabric into your waistband without it being all bulky. And also, and I won't take it out to sew the inside, but also you get this little hinge effect where it actually kind of pops out and gives you a little bit of body too. So that's a bonus. And so they're using sewing machines. They can do all the long things on a sewing machine now. By the 1859, sewing machines were really ubiquitous and people had multiple, and it was a thing. There were people that didn't trust them. They were like, I have hand sewn all my life, and I don't know if that sewing machine hem is going to hold as strong as my hand sewn hem. But a lot of them were chain stitch instead of lock stitch, which our machines are now. They were treadles or they were hand cranks, and so they might have a shuttle in them, or if they're crank, if they're a chain stitch, they might not have that shuttle in there. And some of us bring them to events so that we can demo that, but it's a very technological time. You can buy your hoop from the factory, it's very affordable. You can buy your fabric that came from the factory, it's more affordable. You can, there's lots of buttons available that you're going to pick up. You don't have just rustic looking buttons. Mine are reproductions actually of China buttons from the 1860s. And you can do sewing on the sewing machine. It's a very modern. They felt, if you ask them, that they were living in a very scientific, modern era. There were new things happening in medicine. Some of that got a jump start because of the war, and so there were medical things that could get tested on soldiers with varying degrees of success. But there's a lot. We look back and see oldie time, but there's a lot of technology being used in the 1860s.
Okay. Well, we asked her a couple of questions, and girl has the answers. I like that.
Hi.
Excited. It's
This is the first era that I started diving into. So this
okay.
is the
When did
era
you
that-
start getting into all
I
this,
started
or what?
in-
What's your main interest there? Or is it the clothing, or is it certain eras, or?
For me, the clothing is a ticket to the other things. If you have the correct layers of clothing, then now you have the opportunity to understand the character more, but also to get to do the other kinds of living history things. You kind of need to start with the clothing. That's the starting thing. I do multiple eras. I started doing living history for the 1860s, maybe 25 years ago. I would have started sooner if I'd known a place to start. You know, I've lived in different states and always thought that would be a neat thing to do. And I also, though, do Revolutionary War history and Federal era history. Federal era is what we think of as Regency. We didn't have a regent in the United States, so in this country what's going on is creating a new country, settling this Northwest Territory. It's a very interesting time to look at historically, and tends to get skipped in school because you got to hurry up and get to the Civil War. So you kind of go Revolutionary War, okay, let's jump to the Civil War, the end, Industrial Revolution, kind of thing like that. Those are the main eras I do. I'm working on 1830s right now. There's interesting things you skip in the 1830s. And you get to really dive into detailed day-to-day stuff when you're doing living history that you don't notice when you're just reading an overview. Because you have to ask questions. How would they do this? You realize that, oh, I need to do this at the event. What do I need to wear to do that? What do I need to bring to do that? What supplies would they have to do that? And it makes you dig in a little. So it's kind of neat.
Hey, well, thank you. Yeah, I wouldn't know what questions to ask. I had a simple one, and you had
Yeah,
the
this
full
is
information.
And then I'll
Yes,
fill out the
yeah.
sections.
She gets a gold star. Oh, there you
my
go.
goodness, can I put it on my forehead?
Listen, that'll just give a mark for the Jedis to come after you. I saw.
I left my lightsaber
That's a
downstairs.
different video.